the James Bond franchise before 007 even hit the big screen. Premiering in 1959, Hitchcock dropped audiences into a paranoid, cross-country nightmare, where Cary Grant's endlessly suave advertising executive was violently thrust into a world of mistaken identity, Cold War espionage, and a magnetic Eva Marie Saint. Across 6 decades of spy movie imitators, breathless film school analysis, and a permanent place in pop culture, the film became the absolute gold standard for the blockbuster chase movie. Yet, behind those perfectly tailored suits and that effortless wit was a saga of furious government feuds, illegal guerrilla filmmaking, a bitter betrayal of a Hollywood legend, and a leading man who spent the entire production completely confused about what he was filming. These are 20 shocking facts about North by Northwest. Stick around for fact 1, because the truth about the massive, bitter standoff over the film's iconic Mount Rushmore finale is more unbelievable than anything that made it to the screen. Before we board the 20th Century Limited, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Unseen Ends deep dives into the classic films that refuse to fade away. Fact 20. The movie that started as a sneeze. Most films begin with a script, a character, or a message. North by Northwest began with a single bizarre image in Alfred Hitchcock's head. He told a journalist that he desperately wanted to shoot a scene where Cary Grant was hiding inside the nostril of Abraham Lincoln on Mount Rushmore, and suddenly has a sneezing fit, giving away his position to the bad guys. That one ridiculous, isolated visual gag was the entire genesis of the movie. Hitchcock hired writer Ernest Lehman with a single directive: write a story that justifies getting Cary Grant onto Lincoln's face. Fact 19. The title that means absolutely nothing. North by Northwest is universally recognized as one of the coolest titles in cinema history. It is also completely geographically impossible. There is no such compass direction as North by Northwest. It is a subtle reference to a line of dialogue in Shakespeare's Hamlet, indicating a state of calculated madness. But it wasn't the original choice. During production, the movie was heavily pitched to studio executives under incredibly clunky titles, including In a Northwesterly Direction and, unbelievably, The Man on Lincoln's Nose. They eventually settled on the impossible compass point simply because it sounded the best. Fact 18. The star who had no idea what was happening, Cary Grant, was the most sophisticated leading man in Hollywood. But on the set of this film, he was completely lost. About a third of the way through production, Grant famously approached Hitchcock and complained bitterly that the script made absolutely no sense and that he had no idea what was actually going on. Hitchcock, in his typical fashion, didn't explain a thing. He wanted Grant to feel exactly as confused, paranoid, and off balance as his character, Roger Thornhill. Grant didn't realize until he saw the finished film that his genuine bewilderment was exactly what made the performance work. Fact 17. The bitter betrayal of Jimmy Stewart. Cary Grant's performance is iconic, but he wasn't supposed to be in the movie. James Stewart, who had just starred in Hitchcock's Vertigo, was absolutely desperate to play Roger Thornhill. He practically begged for the part. But Vertigo had just bombed spectacularly at the box office, and Hitchcock placed the blame entirely on Stewart, claiming the actor looked too old to be a convincing romantic lead. Rather than tell Stewart to his face, Hitchcock simply delayed the start of production until Stewart had a scheduling conflict and had to take another film, clearing the path to instantly hire Cary Grant. Fact 16. The mother who was exactly the same age. The dynamic between Thornhill and his dismissive, sharp-tongued mother, Clara, is one of the comedic highlights of the film's first act. But the casting was a biological impossibility. Jessie Royce Landis, the actress playing Cary Grant's mother, was born in November 1896. Cary Grant was born in January 1904. The woman playing his elderly, overbearing mother was in real life barely 10 months older than him. Grant's impossibly youthful looks allowed the production to pull off a casting trick that should have been entirely obvious. Fact 15. The villain's quiet, forbidden romance. Martin Landau played Leonard, the ruthless right-hand man to James Mason's villainous Van Damme. In 1959, Hollywood censors strictly forbade any depiction of homosexuality on screen. Landau found a way around it. He decided to play Leonard as secretly, obsessively in love with his boss, Van Damme. He subtly adjusted his body language, his stares, and his resentment of Eva Marie Said's character to reflect the jealousy of a spurned lover. Hitchcock noticed immediately, completely loved the choice, and allowed Landau to quietly create one of the first subtly coded gay villains. Fact 14. The illegal guerrilla filmmaking at the UN. Hitchcock needed to film Thornhill walking into the United Nations headquarters in New York. But the UN had a strict policy banning all film and television productions from their property. Hitchcock refused to take no for an answer. He rented a carpet-cleaning truck, hid a massive camera setup inside it, and parked it directly across the street from the UN entrance. Cary Grant simply walked casually through the public plaza and up to the building, while Hitchcock secretly filmed him from inside the disguised truck. Fact 13. The filthy joke the censors tried to erase. During the iconic sultry dinner scene on the train, Eva Marie Saint's character famously says to Grant, "I never discuss love on an empty stomach."
I think you're here if you should come in.
Is that a proposition?
I never discuss love on an empty stomach.
You've already eaten.
But you haven't.
If you look closely at her lips, that is not what she is saying.
I never discuss love on an empty stomach.
The original line in the script, which they actually filmed, was "I never make love on an empty stomach." The studio censors completely panicked when they heard it and forced the filmmakers to change it in post-production. They brought Saint into a recording booth to dub the word "discuss" over the original, far more provocative. Fact 12. The final shot that broke every rule. Hitchcock was deeply frustrated by the censors constantly trying to sanitize his films. So he decided to end North by Northwest with the most blatant, outrageous sexual innuendo he could possibly imagine. After Thornhill pulls Eve up from the cliff, the scene cuts instantly to them kissing in a train bed, and then immediately cuts to a shot of a massive train violently plunging into a dark, narrow tunnel. It was entirely unscripted. Hitchcock added it as a giant visual middle finger to the censorship board. Later bragged. Fact 11. The perfectly tailored armor. Cary Grant spends almost the entire 2.5-hour film being shot at, chased by planes, and climbing down mountains in a single, immaculate gray suit. That suit is now considered one of the most famous pieces of wardrobe in cinema history. The production had exactly identical copies of the suit made, so Grant could always look perfectly tailored, regardless of what he had just survived. That exact look, the sharp, unflappable gentleman surviving chaos without wrinkling his lapels, became the direct, acknowledged inspiration for Sean Connery's James Bond just 3 years later. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the blueprint of the modern spy thriller, hit that like button and subscribe before the crop duster comes back around. Drop a comment below with your favorite scene, and if it's the chaotic auction house. Fact 10. The absolute purest MacGuffin in cinema. Hitchcock coined the term MacGuffin to describe an object that the characters care deeply about, but the audience doesn't need to care about at all. North by Northwest features the ultimate MacGuffin. The villains are chasing Thornhill over government secrets hidden inside a small statue. What are the secrets? Who is buying them? What do they do? The movie never bothers to explain it. Hitchcock completely stripped the plot device of any meaning. The microfilm exists purely to give Cary Grant an excuse to run for his. Fact 9. The extra who ruined the surprise. In the tense Mount Rushmore cafeteria scene, Eve pulls a gun and suddenly shoots Thornhill in front of a crowd of screaming onlookers. It is a massive shock, unless you happen to be looking at the background. Directly behind Eva Marie Saint, a young boy in a blue shirt can be clearly seen plugging his ears with his fingers a full 2 seconds before she actually pulls the trigger. The child extra knew the loud bang was coming and braced for it early. Hitchcock either didn't notice it in the editing room or simply. Fact 8. The invisible murder weapon. When the UN diplomat is assassinated, he falls into Thornhill's arms, and Thornhill mistakenly pulls the knife out of his back, framing himself for the murder. It looks incredibly violent for 1959. But if you watch the moments right before, you never actually see the knife enter the man's body. The assassin simply walks past him holding the knife flat against the actor's coat, and the actor arches his back as if he's been stabbed. Hitchcock relied entirely on the audience's imagination to fill in the violence that the censors wouldn't allow him to show. Fact 7. The hostage negotiation over a salary. Cary Grant wasn't just a movie star. He was a ruthless businessman. He negotiated a massive contract for the film, securing a flat fee of $450,000, plus a substantial percentage of the gross profits. But his real masterstroke was a penalty clause. Grant insisted that if the film shot even 1 day over its scheduled wrap date, the studio would have to pay him an additional $5,000 per day. Because Hitchcock was meticulous and the production was massive, they went wildly over schedule. Grant walked away with an absolute fortune in penalty fees alone. Fact 6. The forest that had to be painted. For the scene where Thornhill and Eve reunite in the pine forest, Hitchcock built a massive set on a Hollywood soundstage. To make it look authentic, he had the crew bring in thousands of actual pine needles from the mountains to cover the studio floor. There was just one problem. Under the blistering heat of the massive studio lighting grids, the real pine needles dried out and turned brown almost immediately. The crew spent hours manually spray painting the dead pine needles back to a vibrant cinematic green. Fact 5. The drunk driving scene mechanics. When the villains force bourbon down Thornhill's throat and put him in a stolen car to push him off a cliff, the resulting drunk driving sequence feels chaotic and terrifying. To get the specific, disoriented look of a man struggling to control a vehicle, the crew gave Cary Grant a steering wheel that wasn't connected to anything. The background footage was projected behind him and sped up, while Grant threw himself around the front seat, wildly oversteering an unattached wheel to simulate the frantic terror of a careening car. Fact 4. The crop duster sequence is widely considered one of the greatest action scenes ever filmed. Hitchcock designed it entirely to subvert Hollywood cliches. He noted that in every thriller, a character is ambushed in a dark, wet, claustrophobic alleyway. He decided to do the exact opposite. He placed Cary Grant in a wide-open, completely flat, sun-drenched cornfield with absolutely nowhere to hide. For a staggering 7 minutes of screen time, there is almost zero dialogue, no music, and no shadows. Just pure. Fact 3. The explosive plane crash. When the crop duster finally crashes into the gasoline truck, it creates a massive fireball. The production couldn't safely fly a real plane into a real truck on location. The entire crash was achieved using detailed miniatures back in Hollywood. The special effects team built a highly realistic, scaled-down version of the truck and the plane, colliding them on a controlled set. It was edited so seamlessly with the location footage of Cary Grant diving into the ditch. Fact 2. The missing Lincoln nose sneeze. Remember that bizarre image of Cary Grant sneezing inside Abraham Lincoln's nostril that launched the entire movie. It never actually got filmed. By the time writer Ernest Lehman finished the script, he realized that stopping a massive, life-or-death chase sequence on the face of Mount Rushmore just so the main character could have a comedic sneezing fit completely ruined the tension of the climax. Hitchcock reluctantly agreed to abandon the very idea that sparked the film in the first place, sacrificing his favorite joke to save the movie. Fact 1. The furious government feud over Mount Rushmore. The climax of the film hinges on a desperate chase across the faces of Mount Rushmore. Hitchcock originally secured permission from the Department of the Interior to film on the real monument. But when the government read the script and realized people would be shooting guns and dying on the faces of American presidents, they were completely outraged. They instantly revoked Hitchcock's permits, banning him from filming any scenes of violence on the actual mountain. Hitchcock was furious. He was forced to fly back to Hollywood and spend a fortune building massive, painstakingly detailed replicas of the president's faces on an MGM soundstage just to film the climax. The feud didn't end there. In the finished film, Hitchcock included a title card thanking the Department of the Interior for their cooperation. The government hated the violent final product so much that they legally forced the studio to rip the thank you credit out of the movie before it was released to theaters. The most iconic location in the film wasn't even real, and the government wanted absolutely nothing to do with it.